So thank you everyone for joining us today. My name is Cara Ryman and I am with the Maine State Library. I am a library consultant specializing in youth services. So I work with public libraries all across the state. And we are here today as part of our STEM in Libraries Month initiative, which is October. So hopefully if you are users of your local community, you've seen some STEM stuff. If you're not, I encourage you to go visit them and check out what they're doing. Everyone may not be participating. It's the first year, but we're hoping that it will grow from here. So I'm going to introduce our guests here, and then we're going to chat. And I will try to keep an eye on the Q&A questions as they come up. Go ahead and put them in there, and we'll address those as we go. So we have Dr. Kristen Onos, who received her PhD in neuroscience from the University of New Hampshire in 2013, and has since been working at the Jackson Laboratory with Dr. Gareth Howell. She's currently a research scientist with her work focused on using new mouse models of Alzheimer's disease to uncover new drug therapies. And she's also a current member of the Board of Trustees for Ellsworth Public Library. Thank you for your service. We've got Kaylyn Zipp, who's a doctoral student at the University of Maine School of Marine Scientists, advised by Dr. Walt Golay at the Gulf of Maine Research Institute, who are friends of ours. Kay grew up in Broad Channel, Queens, New York City, nicknamed the Venice of New York for the canals on every block. And Broad Channel is an island in Jamaica Bay Wildlife Refuge, which I did not know was a thing. And so life in the community is always centered around the water. Fascination with the water began early, playing in the mudflats as a kid. She completed her undergraduate education in environmental science with a concentration in watershed science and a focus on marine ecosystems at the State University of New York School for Environmental Science and Forestry. Wow, that's a and there she found her love of fish and otoliths, which is a word I had to look up. Tiny earbone with significant implications for fisheries research. Kay came to U Maine in GMRI during the summer of 2022 after completing her master's at West Virginia University, studying fish consumption of microplastics in large navigable rivers. And she's working now on her dissertation around distribution, age, and growth of the Atlantic bluefin tuna. And Kay also enjoys hiking, climbing, and making fish-related art. That sounds fun. And then Colleen, you may be able to tell where she is at in her background. She is joining us fresh off being on TV as a member of the WMTW News 8 weather team since June of 2022. She was born and raised in coastal Massachusetts, got her meteorology degree from Plymouth State University in New Hampshire in 2016. And she started her career as a morning meteorologist in Rapid City, South Dakota, tracking her fair share of hailstorms and springtime blizzards. And from there, she went on to serve as chief meteorologist in Utica, New York, honing her forecast skills with lake effect snow. And she's thrilled to be back home in New England to work in the very place she fell in love with weather. Sometimes wet. When she's not on air, Colleen enjoys playing video games, experimenting in the kitchen, and hitting the trails with her dog, Luna. So thank you, everyone. Welcome. We're very excited to have you here today and hear from you. So I've got some questions to start with, and then we're going to open it up to questions from our audience. First, tell us about what you do at your job. And why don't we just start with Kristen for this one?
All right, so a lot of what I do at my job, the Jackson Laboratory is, you can get there on your way to Acadia National Park. We're a very old research institute / where other labs across the world order mouse models from. But what I do there day to day is I work, well, actually I wear many hats day to day. I could be one day at the benchtop doing different types of experiments, like measuring any number of different things in the blood or from the brains of the animals in order to determine stuff that's important for Alzheimer's disease and dementia, which I'm sure everyone in this room has had some sort of experience with. And then other times I am stuck behind the computer writing lots and lots and lots of grants in order to get my research funded. So there really is many hats that I wear and lots of different things that I do on a day-to-day basis. I guess one of my favorite things to do is when we have research interns come in. So if you go to college and then you're not really sure what you want to do after that, they have a position where you can come and just learn for a couple of years and intern in the lab before you make your decision for a full commitment to a master's or a PhD, which I'm sure the other panelists know how much work that is. And then, so it's fun. I get to work with all kinds of different mentees of all ages. So.
Hey, do you want to go next?
Sure. So as a PhD student, it's kind of like being a job and being a student at the same time. So I take a small amount of classes now, but a lot is focused on research. And so my research kind of comprises two components. We have field work. So field work is where I actually go out on the boat and I tag Atlantic bluefin tuna. And so if you've ever seen those really pretty tracks where it shows where the fish has gone over about the period of a year, I'm the one going out there and taking the sample and stabbing the fish. And then I spend a lot of time back at the lab processing that data. We also take a number of other samples in conjunction with the fishery. So we work a lot with dealers and fishermen to take samples ranging from genetics to otoliths, like she mentioned, which is a small earstone that we can use for a lot of information. And then we process that, and all of the information that we process goes directly into international management of the fishery, which is really, really cool. Similarly, we also have interns that can come and work in our lab. So I do work with interns over the summer that get to just kind of see what a day in the life of a marine biologist is.
And so for me as a meteorologist, and a television meteorologist in particular, my typical day will start off at about 2 a.m. to get me to work and ready by 3 a.m. I spend a couple hours forecasting, looking at weather models and coming up with my forecast. And I heard a great comparison today, actually, I want to share with you, where if you think about the computer models, the weather models that we look at, like a doctor showing you an x-ray, while all the meteorologists across the state of Maine may be looking at the same weather models, they're going to have a different diagnosis for that x-ray or a different forecast based on their past experience. And, and how much you trust in those models. So we do spend a couple hours of our day forecasting, and then of course we're hopping on air, presenting the forecasts for several hours at a time, and then we have to record radio forecasts to go out around the state as well. Big part of my job is also being out live in the field for snow conditions, severe thunderstorms, things like that. And we do a lot of talks like this, going to the public and either teaching about weather. Everyone always has a million questions that we're happy to answer. So that's what it's like in a typical day, very different from meteorologists that are off of the air, but we are making our own forecast. Every icon that you see on that 8-day forecast and every number was chosen by me, and updated several times a day, every day.
Wow, thank you. And so you're in at 2 a.m. What time are you out?
Either 11 p.m. some days or closer to 1:30 like today. I've been here since 3.
Holy cow. Okay. So what is it that you like about STEM science that kind of led you into this field? And I'll just let you guys go ahead and talk when you're ready.
I'll go first. So I am a hands-on learner. Originally, I wanted to be a doctor, then decided that wasn't for me. And I'm the type of person that really needs to be in it. And that's what I like about being a marine biologist, is that I get to go out in the field and really be in with the samples, in with the people, get to really talk to fishermen because they have a lot of local knowledge. That is a amazing resource here in Maine. And then I get to take that information and process it and kind of translate it up to government officials and management people who are not on the ground. So they don't get to feel the pulse of really what's happening. And so as a person who was just always hands-on and always wanting to be in this is kind of the career that's meant for me.
I guess I'll jump on next. I think what I really like about the job that I do now is that I get to see I kind of get to be the first person to learn something really new that no one else has ever known before. I mean, I obviously will always share that with, you know, my boss and the colleagues in the lab, and then eventually to the public, right? But I think that's really exciting in that sense, and it's kind of neat to look at, or to realize that I approached a problem from a different angle and then was able to get that new answer, if that makes sense. And I guess I would also say the other big piece of my job that I absolutely love is a lot of the science I do is actually huge collaborations across many different institutions across the entire United States. I even have collaborators in other countries that I get to work with. And so it's really cool to see how people from all of those different scientific backgrounds can then contribute to that final answer. So I think that for me is one of the biggest pieces.
For me, and I think in a lot of STEM fields, I got into it because I wanted to know the unknown. I wanted to understand something that I didn't understand. And meteorology, forecasting the weather day to day is, as everybody knows, right, very difficult. It changes a lot. It's never the same every day. Every day at work is different for me. So that's definitely a huge part of why I like to be in the field. It's a challenge, but it's an interesting challenge. You know, Mother Nature, the system, there's so much that's going on and still so much unknown even now. But that's kind of why I got into it, was the curiosity of, I want to know why certain things are happening, but also what's going to happen in the future. And genuine little kid curiosity of just wanting to know how things work is what got me here.
Thank you. So we got our first question in, and those who are here, feel free to drop your questions into Q&A at any time. Who were your role models or influencers growing up?
So for me, my role models were obviously the people that I watched on my local news. I grew up in Massachusetts, so there was a lot of Boston meteorologists there. But for my entire childhood, there was never once a chief meteorologist that was female. That just happened this year for the first time in that market. Would love to see it happen here in this market. But only 8% of broadcast meteorologists that are chiefs are females, and only 29% of broadcast meteorologists are female across the board. So I did have some female role models that I looked up to when I was younger. A huge one for me right now is Ginger Zee. She's the first woman ever to become a chief meteorologist at the network level. So she's currently one of my biggest inspirations, but there's meteorologists from all over the country. I won't list off their names because you guys probably don't know who they are, but it's a really big field, constantly new role models that I'm coming across. And I also had only one female professor of meteorology when I was in college, but she went on to become the head of the department and write her own textbook on atmospheric optics. So she really, really inspires me a lot.
So I had a really influential science teacher growing up. Her name was Miss Williams. And she was with me from 4th to 8th grade, and she really fueled my curiosity. She pushed me into every science fair possible and just kind of pushed me into all of that. And then it wasn't until college that I really realized I could take fisheries and turn it into a career. I always thought fish were cool, but it was Dr. Karen Lindbergh at SUNY ESF that really fueled that. She was a little tiny woman with huge dreams and a lot of go-getting. You would see her out in the field nonstop, and it was just really inspiring to me. She kind of took me underneath her wing. And from there, in a very similar way to Colleen, I've just had a bunch of other mentors. I think kind of the beauty of STEM is that you get inspired by all these other really amazing people around you.
Yeah, I guess I was sitting here thinking about someone that I looked up to or idolized while I was growing up and starting on my path through science. And I guess I should backtrack a little bit. So when I was in elementary school, we have standardized testing that everyone has to take. And I actually scored the worst on the science section. I thought for sure I was going to be, this novelist that wrote fantasy novels and science fiction and things like that. I really
I was
thought
in that same boat, did better in English than math and science, but still ended up in
Yeah, I really thought that that's what I was going to do and where I was going to go. And honestly, I've never uh really worked for too many female mentors or bosses. So I would say I kind of been learning as I move along through my career and have been modeling it off multiple different people. Because there just weren't really a lot available to me, especially where I was the first person in my family to even go to college, let alone grad school, right? And so I think I kind of didn't know what I was getting myself into, but I'm glad that it ended up happening anyway.
So that idea of not necessarily always being good at science, and I know as a child I wasn't into science. I never felt encouraged, but as an adult now, I love it, and I love that I get to incorporate it into my library work too. Can you talk a little bit about sort of your experience of that and how you got to be in a spot where you wanted to work in STEM and were able to?
I mean, for me, I think it just naturally developed across time. And so originally when I went to do my undergraduate degree, I thought I was going to go into marketing and advertising. And so a big portion of that is understanding why people are motivated to do certain things. And so then that ended up leading me to basically think about, psychology. And I started to major in psychology, but I knew right away that I absolutely did not want to be a therapist. That was not my calling within that umbrella. And so I ended up, I guess one thing I would really encourage everyone to do, no matter where, if you go to college or whatever you do, think about traveling and getting experiences different places. So when I was in college, I actually did a national student exchange with the University of Hawaii, mainly because I wanted to hang out in Hawaii for a year. But while I was there, I actually took a psychobiology class. So that's the intersection between psychology and biology. And that's when I first realized, wow, I can make a difference. I can learn how the brain works and help people, but I don't actually have to listen to people having problems all the time, right? Like I can be behind the scenes and try to find out ways to fix those problems. So that was kind of my progression slowly away from thinking I was going to be, this really famous science fiction author to kind of discovering. We always say science is complicated magic, right? Basically. So kind of makes sense that I ended up on this trajectory.
Yeah, I
That's pretty
see. Oh,
common with people, like, sorry to cut you off, Kay, that don't, they don't even realize that certain opportunities are out there for them. When you're a high schooler or middle schooler, you may not even realize that there's these different types of roles in STEM that everyone can fit in, even if you're not testing well, in math and physics and stuff like that. I always did horribly on all the standardized tests, tested very highly in English and things. But I realized that I really liked physics. That's sort of where it kind of snapped in my brain to, like, okay, I think this might actually, because I always knew I wanted to potentially do weather, but once I got to physics and I really, really enjoyed that course, I realized, okay, it's three-dimensional physics, right? It's three-dimensional fluid dynamics. So that was when I started to take it more and more seriously. I remember my dad sitting me down with the course catalog before I, accepted my offer to go to the school, and saying, are you sure that you want to get this degree? It's an engineering degree. It requires a minor in math because of the amount of math courses that you have to take. Are you sure you want to do this? And luckily, that just made me want to do it more and prove him wrong. And I'm glad that I stuck with it. It has one of the highest attrition rates. So a lot of people that drop out and change major once they get there and realize how difficult the coursework is. It's a lot of, grueling coursework, but really worth it. In the end, I learned a lot. And a lot of people that get my degree as well gain skills that can help them in a bunch of other fields as well. So you get a degree in one thing, you could easily shift into some other type of STEM role because you're learning the same problem solving type skills that you need.
yeah, I would agree. It's like an iterative process of trial and error to figure out kind of where you want to be. Um, I didn't have the goal of returning back to marine biology and marine systems at first. Even though I grew up near them, I just kind of felt my way out and just tried the opportunities that kind of came around. And that's the one thing I would encourage, is just being really open to opportunities and new experiences and new skills, because you just never know where it's going to help you down the line. One thing that I use all the time that I would have never had expected is coding. Data science in general has become kind of my thing, my niche in fisheries science. And it really just started with me taking a single coding course and being like, huh, this is kind of cool. And then it kind of evolved into something else. So keeping your mind open and just exploring.
So related to that, we've had someone ask, were there roadblocks that you had to overcome in your journey to get here? And if so, how did you overcome them?
So I'm a first generation graduate from high school all the way now to PhD. And so I grew up below the poverty line. My family raised me on $14,000 a year of a single mom. So that was definitely a huge roadblock. When it came to college advice, she had none, for applications and things like that. But I think that's where I found a lot of skills in making connections with other people so that way they could help me. So my best friend's parents were very influential. He is part of SUNY Oneonta. He's a professor there and now a dean. And he sat me down. He was like, all right, let's have this conversation of how you do this. And so I would say when it comes to roadblocks, it's just persistence and believing in yourself. Because you are going to come across people that don't believe in you. And you have to believe in yourself and what you want and just carry yourself through.
Yeah, I can't think of anything like super specific roadblock wise that I had, other than, just being very often the only female in the room, and having very few female colleagues or females to look up to. But I'm noticing that it really is getting better. I mean, at least in my specific subfield of broadcast meteorology, it's getting better, but I'm seeing more and more, it seems like, females across research and other STEM fields as well. So I hope that that is a little bit of a glimmer of hope for people, that I'm very often the only woman in the room, but that's happening less and less, it seems.
Yeah, I think for me, I would just echo the financial component of it. So that can be, a huge roadblock for a lot of people, being able to afford college, being able to take out student loans. I mean, when you go to college, you've turned 18 and now all of a sudden you're getting offered thousands upon thousands of dollars in student aid. And that might not have ever been a possibility before. And so understanding how much money you actually should take out for college, that you then know that your career path could potentially help you pay that back in the future. I'll just point out, always look for programs and reach out to people in your community. So I took out, I think I was upwards of $80,000 in student loan debt to get all the way to my PhD. And across time, I was able to take advantage of, there's a huge initiative in the state of Maine to fund STEM education, learning, and career trajectories, really. So I got all fund leaders funding to help pay back some of my student loans. I participated in a program through the National Institutes of Health that really funds all of our science that we do. They paid back some of my student loans. And so I just looked around and tried to find, whatever resources I could in order to make it more feasible for me to actually complete my my education, and then, not be necessarily tied down to it for the rest of my life. So always ask. It doesn't hurt to ask.
Sometimes the odds are better when they have to give the grant to a female and there's only 2 of them in the programs.
So how has climate change affected your work, if at all?
So
All right,
for
go
oh
ahead.
yeah, so for me, I would say climate change is always in the background. Um, a lot of what I do, I like to term fish accounting. So it's kind of looking at the pulse rates of populations and how they increase and decrease over time, right? And what the fish are eating. And I think people like to think of climate change as this separate science topic, but it's kind of the backdrop now. Everything is thought about in context to that, right? And how can we make predictions into the future? So we do forecasting, but usually it's got a lot more uncertainty because we're looking at something under the water that we can't really see and can't really fully follow and things like that. Um, and so, yeah, we try to do that all with thinking and taking this into account.
Oops, sorry. So climate change was sort of a sub-focus of mine when I was at college because I knew it was such a hot topic that people were going to expect me to be the expert on as a meteorologist, even though I'm not a climatologist. I did take climatology courses and I chose to take an elective in it. Um, and right away, as soon as I got into the television industry, it's this hotly debated topic. There are a lot of opinions that I'm getting, from the public and stuff like that. But it's so clear when you look at the way that weather patterns are now, when you look at the data, when you look at the natural warming and cooling of the earth and the unprecedented rate that it's happening at now. I mean, people ask us about it all the time. And even though that weather and climate are different, because climate is the long-term average of weather, and because warmer climate, more energy in the system affects the patterns, like it's all connected. So it's definitely affected my work, both in that it affects the weather, but it also affects what I'm talking about, how I'm talking about it, trying to communicate this, issue to people without it getting heated.
A lot of the work that I do, a lot of the animals that I work with for our research, are kept in very specific facilities with certain temperatures and that sort of thing. And so at face value, it doesn't really impact what I do day to day, except that when we start to think about, as if climate is changing in different locations, that can mean a lot in terms of what's happening to, what different immune systems, what your body has to fight off. And all of that matters. So much as you think about, I have a cold, I have an immune system that protects me when I'm sick, you have that same sort of immune cell function in your brain too, that's working to protect you. And so, believe it or not, a lot of that is tied. Nothing is really separate. Everything can become integrated. So, I mean, that's what makes science fun, right? Everything's complex. So
Lots of different ways to study it and think about it. So I just have to put a plug in here. Speaking of climate change, we are the Maine State Library and librarians. We are working with the Gulf of Maine Research Institute and a whole bunch of other partners on something called the Learning Ecosystem Northeast. But it's all about climate education and talking about that and how do we do that and doing it in informal and formal education places. So if you're interested in hearing more about that, email me later. Are you aware of any programs for women or girls in high school or middle school to job shadow or try out STEM careers, or even just find out what STEM careers there might be?
I'll say no for me. I didn't hear of any, at least. I'm sure they existed, but not that I came across.
So a good resource can sometimes be professional societies. For me, the American Fisheries Society, it's one of the oldest and largest fisheries societies in the world. And they have the Hutton program, which it basically allows high school students to go and do many research projects with institutions. And the way that works out is you can actually go to that institution, talk with them and say, hey, I would really like to do research with you, and then they apply for the Hutton money, and then they can pay you while you're doing it, which is really awesome for students that may or may not have the funds to do research, right? And you can get that experience at a very young age. And it does translate into opportunities later on. So we had an intern at GMRI who was an REU student, so research experience for undergrad, in getting her bachelor's, and she was a Hutton scholar. So things kind of add up over time.
I would say for the one thing I like about working at the Jackson Lab is we do have an education department at JAX, and it's not just focused on pre-doc or graduate student education and postdocs. They also do a lot of outreach in terms of they will go, I think they even go down to, I think they do middle school, high school for sure. There might even be some elementary grades, but they have a course that they will come out and teach called Teaching the Genome Generation, where they actually have all of the materials in kits with them to come and teach students how to do PCR, for example. So how do you genotype for something? So they have programs like that. We also have the ability, at least with local area high schools, if there are students that want to do an internship with a lab and get some experience that way as like a side project, they do have things in place to allow that to happen. And then one thing I never knew about when I was growing up in Maine was they also have the summer student program. And so in order to be part of the summer student program, I think you can be a junior or a senior in high school, as well as a freshman or sophomore in undergrad. And you can come participate for 10 weeks and basically work for a lab. You get to live at the High Seas Mansion at JAX. All your food's taken care of, and they pay you a really nice stipend. So that you have to apply to be involved in, but definitely if there's something that a research area that we're doing that you might be interested in, definitely think about applying for that program.
Wow. Would you guys mind sending me links to the programs that you talked about, and like to include them when we send out the recording? So I want to remind folks here, we're open to any questions. What are you curious about? Particularly if there are groups here, looks like we might have a classroom or two, and maybe a library group. Think about it, put something in. In the meantime, I have a silly, unrelated question kind of, but what do you think you would have done if you didn't end up doing what you are now?
I would probably be in marketing and advertising because that's what I first thought I was going to do. I'm not sure, even though I always thought I wanted to write fantasy and science fiction novels growing up, I'm not sure if I would really have the ability to sit down and write that much at one time. I do a lot of writing in my current career, but to write, a 400-page novel all the time, I'm not sure if I would have been cut out for that.
I think for me, I probably would have gone into education. That was sort of something that I thought I would be interested in outside of meteorology, or maybe something else sort of physics related, but it was weather since 5th grade, and that's how it worked out.
At this point, probably statistics and data science. A huge computer nerd, really about the coding and modeling, and it really translates kind of into anything. Colleen was talking about those skills that you can take and carry with you anywhere. It's something where I could go into any real company and do data science. And it's super fascinating because you get to learn about a bunch of different stuff. And so I think, yeah, if I had to change tomorrow, that would probably be it.
Thank you. We did get a question. What are your thoughts about the eclipse in this coming April, where we'll have total eclipse here in Maine, parts of it?
I could talk about this one because I've been talking about it on air already. I was lucky enough to be in the path of totality for the 2016 Great American Solar Eclipse. I was in Nebraska for that. And so the one that we're having in April is a huge deal for Maine because the path of totality will be in Maine. So the eclipse that we had the other day on Saturday, you had to have eclipse glasses on in order to view it. The one that's happening in April, if you're in the path of totality, which you'll have to drive to northern Maine to get inside the path, you'll actually be able to take your eclipse glasses off for the 3.5 minutes of total darkness. This is definitely like a bucket list item. I'm telling everyone that they need to put on their bucket list to see totality for yourself. I just highly recommend it. The problem is, statistically, mid-April is cloudy about 75% of the time in northern Maine, so it could all be ruined by the forecast. I'm going to be having extreme anxiety in the weeks leading up to it, you can bet. But worth traveling, making last-minute plans if you have to drive to upstate New York or something to get into the path of totality. Yes, it's only 3.5 minutes, but it's super worth it. Be prepared for traffic jams, but I think it's going to be, if we have sunshine, a really big deal for us.
Any thoughts from you other panelists? I will say we did get a follow-up question. What do you think the weather will be like? So, thanks for answering that.
It's more likely that it's going to be cloudy than sunny right now. So that's climatologically speaking, right? When you look at the long-term patterns, we won't know until a couple of days out whether or not we'll be able to actually catch it. And even then, there was people in South Carolina had this whole huge event for the last total solar eclipse. Beautiful day, all day long. During totality, one cloud moved in front of the sun. So they only caught like the last 30 seconds of totality. So we are at the mercy of the weather, unfortunately, but that's going to be an incredible sight to see, even if we're clouded in and have to watch it on the live stream.
There will be changes though, right, in the environment around us?
Yes, for sure. So you notice the shadows will start to look different, especially if you're looking at light that's filtered through a tree. So a lot of these pictures from our last eclipse that we just had, shadows look different. It gets really dark. Sometimes you'll hear the crickets start chirping and the birds will go into the trees to roost, thinking that it's nighttime. And it doesn't get pitch black, at least in my experience. But I think if we're viewing it from northern Maine, because of the way that the topography is and us not being able to see the horizon, I think it is going to be a lot darker. Where I was, it sort of looked like a sunset in 360 degrees. It was dark, where the sun was overhead. So it'll be interesting to see how it kind of looks different in mountainous Maine versus Nebraska. But yeah, we're looking forward to it.
We don't have any other questions at the moment. Well, let's, if you had to give advice to someone who wanted to sort of end up in a similar place to where you are for your career, what would you offer them?
So the real roadblock, I think, is getting hands-on experience in my field. It has a really interesting job progression where you kind of start out on the ground and then you kind of move into the office. And some people stagnate themselves on that path. And so I would really emphasize choosing college programs where you get that hands-on experience. So labs, they're going to be intense. It's going to be a lot to carry on your schedule. But that is something that I am 1,000% thankful for and really helped progress my career. Going to SUNY ESF, the School for Environmental Science and Forestry in New York, was that I had so many labs. I had a soils lab and a fisheries lab and things like that. And there is nothing better than getting those field skills, honestly.
So I guess I would say for someone, if they're interested in getting into specifically broadcast meteorology, I would, encourage them to think about how much they actually like doing math and physics and things like that. But there's a lot of ways you can start to sort of get involved in high school. Kids will start to do the weather on their morning announcements or something like that. Any way that you can kind of start to, even if you're not making your own forecast, you can practice sort of that presentation side of things. And at least from the people that I've come in contact with, there's so few of us, right, TV meteorologists around, that if you reach out to everyone in your local area, even as a high school student, we'll have you in to shadow us for a day and show you what we do. You know what I mean? It's one of those things, like you were saying, you have to get in the lab and really experience it. For what we do, you really have to get into a newsroom and experience what it's like to work in a studio. It's not for everybody. So that hands-on experience is super, super crucial. And I lost my train of thought of what else I was going to say. So if I think of it, you can come back.
Yeah, just echoing what was already said in terms of getting that hands-on experience. And I think the other cool thing is, and I think everyone has kind of figured this out since the pandemic, and you know, we're even talking to you on a Zoom session right now. Most people like talking about the work that they do. Like they don't mind doing it at all. And so, you know, even if it's someone not even in your state, you know, doing the work that you think sounds really cool or interesting, or you happen to see a news clip about a new discovery, just take a chance and reach out, because often people love connecting and telling you about what they did and why they did it. And I think just really taking advantage of the entire community is going to be really helpful for you.
I wish I had realized that sooner, like at a younger age, how, you know, the power of social media and all that, it's so easy to reach out to people, and people really are so willing to, you know, if you're interested in getting into the field, I would rather be honest, you know, give you all the information that you need, whether you decide to or not. I think the thing I wanted to mention too is just for high schoolers trying to get into meteorology, join our local chapter of the American Meteorological Society, and that's going to help you make connections with professional meteorologists in the local area, but it's national. They have conferences and you can attend as a student. When you're a college student, you can get paid to work at the conference, and they'll pay for your, you know, admission for the week and stuff like that. So there's a few other organizations, but the American Meteorological Society is the biggest one. They're everywhere. No matter where you are, you can find your local chapter. For us in southern Maine, it's going to be in Gray, and northern Maine, it's probably going to be in Caribou, I think is where the meetings happen. That's where the Weather Service offices are located. But and just reaching out, you know, to the guys at the Weather Service too. They'll another office that I'm sure would be happy to have folks in to see what they do, you know, what their operations are like day to day.
Yeah, I want to echo that. Professional societies, I think, are really underutilized. A resource, you know, the American Fisheries Society has had high schools come in and just check out our conference. And so they kind of walk around and check out the posters, and they're able to talk to professionals and just kind of see what it's like. And they're a great resource because it's a bunch of nerds just super stoked to talk about what they love and what they do. And you get to see everyone from college students all the way up to, you know, names that are making headlines in nature, which is really cool.
Thank you. And I can vouch for having trying a newsroom to decide if you really want to go there. I did that during college, and while it was very cool, discovered pretty quickly, like, I don't think that's for me. But I imagine that's the same in probably any area, right? If you can, like Kristen was saying, just ask and see where you can get. I mean, the worst that happens is somebody says no.
Right. And don't feel bad if you know, sign up to be in this society and then all of a sudden you realize it's not for you and you bail out of it. That's, you know, that's just part of life. You got to figure out where you fit in. And it takes sometimes just meeting, you know, the right person and being able to see, oh, that right there is actually exactly what I want to do. I don't want to be on TV as a meteorologist. I want to do, you know, what this guy's doing, and reaching out to them.
And any last questions before we wrap up? I do want to thank you all so much for joining us. This has been really, really great. Hopefully for everyone, but I've loved it just to myself. Just want to wait 1 minute to see if anyone has anything else they want to ask. Anything else you would like to say before we say goodbye? Something we should have asked?
I mean, I think overall what you've seen from what everyone shared today with you is that the definition of what it means to be in STEM is extremely broad. And so, you know, go in with an open mind. And I think, like Colleen was saying, like if you join something or get hands-on experience with something and quickly realize, wow, I don't like working with mice at all, this is terrible, or I don't want to track fish, you know, something like that, that's totally, like, that was the success still, because now you know you don't want to do that. So I think that's really important.
Yeah, I think it can be really easy to just get turned off to like science or math in general as a whole, but being able to realize that there's so many different types of roles. Not every person that works in STEM is crunching numbers or coding, you know. We're needed everywhere in every field.
I think we just hit on something that's really important, and that's the definition of success, right? So the definition of success in STEM looks very different for a lot of different people. And being open to that and defining success for yourself. You know, even when you get rejected from a grant application or rejected from something, it's kind of a success, right? You learn from it and you move on from it and you try something else. So just trying to kind of focus on that instead of just the end goal.
Just always be curious. And if you're curious about something, look it up. Go to your library if you want. Okay, well, thank you, everyone who attended, and for those of you watching the recording, thank you too, and thank you so much to our panelists for joining us today, taking time out of your, I'm sure, incredibly busy schedules to do this with us. So,
Thanks, Kara. Thanks for having me.
much.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.